Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of 10 for the Chairman. For those that you haven't watched this before, this is where I take 10 questions from subscribers and answer them to the best of my ability. Subscribers are the subset of our overall community that contributes some money every month to enable us to do an enhanced amount of community content. So this video show that I'm doing now around the verse that we do on the Thursdays, behind CIG video pieces we do when we sort of show some of the making a ship or designing a system out of various different studios, and also Jump Point, which we do once a month, which is about 50 to 70 pages of really in-depth how things were built and made, and also combined with some fiction. So thank you to subscribers for kicking in the extra money to allow the people and crew and time to do this stuff. So there's always someone behind a camera right here that's is enabled by your contributions. And so, well, let's get to it. So at the top of the show, we actually got a really cool gift. This is the 1919 edition of Fighting the Flying Circus by Eddie Rickenbacker, who was the top American ace of World War II. And this is from Stephen Baron Kobayashi and the Flying Circus Squadron here. So they thank dear Mr. Roberts, as you embark on making history with Star Citizen, we're here at the Flying Circus Squadron would like to impart you a small piece of aviation history. We present to you a 1919 edition of the Fighting with the Flying Circus, written by American World War I ace, Captain Eddie Rickenbacker. May it inspire you to continue the great work you have been doing with the BDSSE, best damn space sim ever, in progress. That in turn will inspire generations of space sim fans to come. On behalf of the squadron, thank you and your crew for making dreams come true. And there's a whole bunch of people in the squadron here, too many to probably name out here, but thank you guys, it's awesome. I mean, this is amazing. Well, it's a lot older than me, but just to have such a great old book, it's fantastic. So it's really cool. I've actually got a couple. I think I showed them quite a few episodes because World War I is actually one of my interests, World War I aviation, and there was a film project that I wrote, and maybe one of these days I will direct, that is based around sort of World War I aviation and the Red Baron and various other historical figures. And so I've actually got quite a few historical books, but I don't have this particular one, and this is fantastic, so thank you very much. Let me put this down and be very careful with it, since it's significantly older than me. In fact, it's almost 100 years old, which is pretty crazy. Okay, let's go to the first of the questions. So this very first question comes from, well, I don't know how to say this correctly, so it's either no git soon or no jit soon. So I probably totally mangled that, but Sullivan, who asks, can data stored on your ship's computer, such as central core bank account details, cargo manifests, and jump point navigation, be lost due to object destruction or compromised by a hacker? Would such a hacker require physical access to your ship's computer? What do you envision the hacking cyber warfare element of Star Citizen look like? A great question. Not something that we've done a massive amount of thought on, but it raises some really interesting issues. I mean, we've been thinking primarily for the Drake Herald and the sort of info runner business about how you would protect data and sort of transmit it, and then also people would want to block and and try and intercept stuff. So there's a certain amount of sort of computer hacking warfare that we were thinking that we would probably do, and we'll probably have some of that on the big ships. That's, I know, one of the designs that we've been talking about for the capital ship stuff is, you would even have one station where the other person's trying to, disrupt the other ship's systems and potentially, jam them, or even maybe try and get a virus aboard them. So there definitely will be some level of that. I don't know so much about hacking, personal details and all the rest of the stuff. That would still be a sort of to be determined sort of design feature. But we are certainly doing quite a few things that will sort of make the kind of hacking warfare an aspect that can happen in the game, because it'll definitely be part of some of the sort of big ship combat and some of the Squadron 42 stuff, and it'll definitely be part of the info runner stuff. And so, who knows, maybe we'll sort of do a little bit of that on the player side, although you wouldn't want to get to the point where someone can get complete identity theft and screwed over in the game, because it's not fun in real life. So we don't really want to do it to anyone in the game to a level where it's sort of devastating. Although maybe a small amount of stuff could be interesting, but that's still a to be determined aspect. But thanks for the question. No git soon, if that was said correctly. All right, next question comes from Light Speed, spelled L-Y-T Speed. Once the PU, the Persistent Universe, is live, will we be able to take jobs on board NPC ships? I want to be able to learn as much as I can about the Jean, the Vandal, and other species that are out there as I can, and one of the best ways to do that might be as crew on a ship. Well, you'll definitely be able to take jobs in the Persistent Universe. The initial thinking was you would take jobs for people in your ship. They ask you to, we need you to take this many tons of goods from this planet to that planet. Also you could get hired to be a pilot of a ship. So not sure whether we're necessarily thinking about letting you sort of be, okay, I take a job as a gunner on a ship, but it's kind of a natural extension of sort of being a pilot of a ship. So that potentially could probably happen. I mean, the NPC AI and intelligence has been sort of set up in a way that you could be a player on a ship and the pilot of the ship's an NPC. So that's not ruled out. It would really sort of determine how our sort of mission and job hiring board would happen, and then also how we would sort of control the meta AI of the NPCs. So if a ship itself has its own sort of persistence and it goes from planet to planet back and forth, and it would have a crew, and maybe you could crew it. So that would be also kind of a question that I would be sort of fleshing out with Tony, because we are right now in the middle of doing a lot of the sort of more fun aspects of the high-end AI design for the Persistent Universe. Okay, next question comes from Shadow Knight, who asks, since we have rovers for some of the constellations and maybe other ships as well, will there be different sizes, say hover bike, for other options? How big an area do you foresee in-game we will be able to use these rovers to explore? Or if you don't want to give a rough early ballpark, how do you foresee us players using them? Well, I definitely think there'll be different kinds of sort of ground transport options. So obviously there's the buggy that we've seen in the hangar. There's the rover that we unveiled when we showed off the Aquila version of the Constellation. And I definitely think there will be some smaller ones and some bigger ones and some luxury models. Kind of the idea is on a longer term basis, we want to build some areas that you can land and you can explore that aren't the same as like landing in necessarily landing in a sort of busy city spaceport and then you walk around. So perhaps you land in sort of open area of countryside and there's maybe some ruins off in the distance and you get in your buggy and you can drive around and do some exploration. So that's sort of the longer term plan, and that's where some of the sort of procedural work that we're doing some R&D on would help come into play. So I don't know how much of that will be in sort of the very first sort of complete version of the Persistent Universe. But it would be something that's in the development pipeline, and we would try to get up and running as soon as possible, because having various areas or some PvE exploration and combat down on planets or in sort of derelicts out in space or in abandoned asteroid bases is something that's kind of a high priority for us, because I think it'll just add a lot of texture to the world itself. So it's not just about flying around in space combat, there's other action that's happening. And I think you guys will also be pretty happy with the way Squadron 42 is going to turn out, because it's pretty epic and more than just Wing Commander style flying missions. Okay, next question comes from Terra Opticon, who asks, you have talked about the slider in the Persistent Universe that will govern whether you prefer more PvP or PvE encounters, but I was thinking, how will this work on a multi-crewed ship? E.g., what if some of the people on board have it set to more PvE and others have it set to more PvP? Who will take precedent? Well, that's a pretty easy one. Essentially, the owner / captain of the ship settings or ratings would be the determining factor of the encounters that ship would come across when it's flying around space. So if you don't really want to be fighting other players, you better not be getting on a ship where someone just likes to fight other players. That's kind of, I would say, a pretty obvious answer to that. Hopefully that's one that you like. Okay, next question comes from Azazel, who asks, with the recent addition of racing, many questions have come up. One of the biggest concerns, the lack of a jump drive on the known dedicated racing ships. With racing taking place in multiple systems across the verse in the PU, how will the M50, Mustang, and 350R owners get their racing from one system to another? Okay, well, so certain things, the 350R definitely will be able to have a jump drive. Mustang also, like the Aurora, would be able to have sort of an upgraded jump drive. The M50 is pretty small, so it's likely not necessary to have a jump drive, but we're going to also have, that's kind of the idea why you have bigger ships. So, if you think about racing in today's world, if people go around racing, they have, big 18-wheelers that they put their race cars in the back in and drive around the country, or even in the case of high-end stuff like Formula One, they put them on planes and fly them around. So we will definitely sort of have transporter ships that you'll be able to take your smaller, something like an M50 in. So for instance, if you have an 890 jump and you're cruising around in style in the universe, you could have an M50 sitting in the cargo bay and race it in various races, just like the super rich do in today's world. We'll definitely have ships that can transport them around. Or if you didn't have a ship that you want to do that, you could probably hire someone to transport your ship to the next race location. Okay, next question comes from Fails Cal-Ator. So Fails Cal-Ator. You guys are coming up with like crazy names to trip me up on this particular 10 for the German. And I'm sure I've butchered most of them. Will we be able to see our alternative character slot NPCs in our hangar as a living, breathing entity, not just as a character slot we can customize? Yes, so I think you're talking about the character, where we've talked about if you have multiple game packages, you can sort of change one of the packages into a customizable NPC for you to have on your crew, as opposed to sort of a generic one you would hire. And yes, you would definitely have them as a character hanging out in your ship or your pad, as it were, like a hangar or something. So if you have, you basically put together your crew, think of it like Serenity or something, and you would see them hanging out, goofing off, doing their various idle states, and then you go off and fly, and they're doing the same on the ship. So yes, they would be NPC characters going about. Maybe they would have some generic conversational lines. That's, to a certain extent, will be fairly challenging because there'll be a lot of different potential NPCs and characters. But we'll try our best to make sure that they have some sense of personality and are kind of fun. Okay, next question comes from Tabascoid. Maybe Ben's just deliberately doing this to me, or you guys just have lots of really interesting names. But Tabascoid asks, the Murray Cup Racing demo at Gamescom showed us flying structures and holograms that were used to indicate the course of the racetrack. Will it be possible for players to rent or buy these devices later in the persistent universe to build own temporary racing tracks through asteroid fields, for example? I don't know. That's a pretty good question. I don't think we're really planning on that. To rent or buy these devices for the persistent universe. I think we would probably have most of the racetracks be sort of preset or predetermined in the universe. I could see with the system we have, you could probably have the little hollow projectors, and you could EVA and place them around an environment. But the problem is that wouldn't really have persistence the way that a proper racetrack would, because you'd be in an instance, and as soon as you left it, it wouldn't happen. So even if we did that, it probably wouldn't have the sort of permanency that the racetracks have. Okay, next question comes from Smart Ace. It's a little easier to say. Who asks, do you rely on any guiding principles when making game design decisions? You've referenced this is what would happen in real life a few times, so I take that as one. but do you have any others that guide your problem solving? Well, quite a few. I mean, obviously real life's a really great example, and past history are good examples because you can see sort of how something works, and also people that are playing the game can also really relate to it because it's something they have seen every day in real life. So the idea of, say, insurance on a spaceship, you can relate to because you have insurance on your car, and for the same kind of reasons that we would have in space. So definitely having some level of real life inform the gameplay, but of course you want to make the game fun, so that's a big guiding principle. So it's sort of focusing on much more of the fun aspects and less of sort of the boring, mundane aspects, because I think most people, even glamorous people, a lot of their day-to-day stuff is fairly mundane, and of course you're not playing a game to do mundane things. Maybe if you're playing something like The Sims, but even The Sims is sort of kind of a very sort of abstracted, kind of more fun version of real life. So I would say that the real life's part of it. Part of it is making it fun, sort of the bit where you sort of feel empowered and you sort of feel special and you can do cool stuff that you can't normally do in real life. And then also to a certain extent making it be easy at the beginning, sort of draw you in. Like one of my big principles is I really like immersion, and immersion I think is really facilitated by really rendering the environment, the world, the characters at like a very high fidelity. And even though you could say, well, the game mechanics aren't particularly different, when you render something and put a little extra care and attention to detail in it, it makes that world seem more alive. I mean, a really good example is the Uncharted series that Naughty Dog's done. And if you look at the base gameplay mechanics, it's not that different than what Tomb Raider did a long time ago, but the difference is they added all these little details and moments, like Drake's going up a staircase and he reaches and touches the banister, and it sort of all makes it sort of feel a bit more real and alive. And the same in The Last of Us had a lot of these touches too. And so the same gameplay mechanics that maybe in another game don't feel quite as connective do in something like an Uncharted, because the attention to detail sort of pulls you in, and so all of a sudden you start putting yourself in that world instead of always thinking you're playing a game. So having a high amount of immersion is a big principle for me to really just pull you into the game, because even if we look at what we're doing in Star Citizen, a lot of the core game mechanics aren't that much different than what we've done in the past on things like Wing Commander or Privateer or Freelancer. I mean, there is a lot more sophistication, there's a lot more stuff, but some of the core ideas, like the whole idea of traveling between planets and earning money so you can upgrade your ship or buy a new ship, has been around for a long time, and it's a very satisfying sort of play path, and so we're just sort of doing that with a half fidelity, and we've got a lot more tweaks, and of course there's the multiplayer and the cooperative aspects, and so there's a lot of things that are going to make it really rich, but it's still the same basic core game mechanics, which if you look at a lot of games, the core mechanics tend to have been very similar for a long time, and a lot of it's about implementation and then nuance and sort of accessibility for people. So I would say for me, my game design principles are about immersion, they're about accessibility, they're about adding depth to a game beyond the accessibility, right? So there's a very famous saying which is sort of like easy to learn, difficult to master, and I think that's a very good paradigm for games. I mean, it's much easier said than done, but in general it's something that you want to have in your game, so someone can just pick it up and have fun, but they don't feel like they mastered it and they're bored with it right away. It takes a long time. So I would say something like a StarCraft something like that had a very good sort of easy to learn, difficult to master thing, where you could play it and you could just play it with the mouse, but if you really wanted to get good at it, it just took a lot more time and attention, and you had to be a whole different level of player. And so that's kind of one of the things that we want to do in Star Citizen, and then in general just create this really big world where I'm really going for a sandbox to allow people to do what they want to do, and sort of live out their fantasy life in space. I mean, it's a fantasy that I've had, and I think most of you guys out there have had. So those are all aspects that go into the design. So I wouldn't, I'm not saying there's any sort of silver bullet. I mean, a lot of it also is, sort of instinct and intuition of like what seems to make sense to me versus anything else. And I just happen, I think, to a certain level, to have a sense of gameplay and style that a lot of other people sort of agree with. So, but there you go. There's my principles. If that helps at all. Okay, next question comes from Vasta Holtex, who asks, my question has to do with weapons and damage scales. Will there be physical limitations to the effectiveness of weaponry against various levels of armor? I.e., will snub fighter cannons be ineffective against larger scale vessels? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty logical. I mean, it's sort of the way things work in real life. If I've got a Colt 45 and I'm shooting at an M1 Abrams, I'm probably not going to do much damage. And the same sort of thing will be true in Star Citizen. So, depending on, we haven't really implemented armor in Arena Commander yet, but that's one of the things that's sort of stubbed in and will be there. But armor will obviously affect. I mean, we have hull damage, but we don't have sort of levels of armor beyond it. So that will have some impact. And obviously, we have the nuance of ballistic weapons versus energy weapons, and obviously, in our world they have different setups. So like ballistic weapons aren't really stopped particularly well by shields, so they tend to go through shields. But our armor is really built to sort of deflect or stop ballistic weapons, whereas energy weapons are deflected and absorbed by shields, but armor isn't so good against them. And also there'll be the size and the scope of the power of the weapon. Like, so if you have, like I said, a handgun and you're trying to shoot a Hornet with it, you'll probably be a lot less successful than firing a Bulldog repeater. I would say yes to that answer. Okay, last question comes from Captain Root Now, who asks, will planets have varying gravity? If I visit a planet with a greater or less gravity than that of Earth, will it affect how I walk on it? Will it slow me down or let me jump higher? How exactly will this affect combat? I'm pretty sure we're going to use gravity. I mean, we haven't explicitly sort of decided, this planet's got half gravity, this planet's got full gravity, but I'm pretty sure we will, because it's a pretty big gameplay element that we're building for sort of the first-person shooter aspect, and it's certainly very prominent in the use in space, so on space stations, asteroid bases, boarding other ships. I mean, there's going to be gameplay where you can turn off gravity, turn on gravity, and that will affect you differently, and so we would be kind of silly not to use all the code and support that we're building for that down on some planets. So you could potentially be on a big heavy gravity planet, and some ones would be like the moon, much lighter gravity. So I would assume that we would probably do something like that in a couple of places. I mean, most places will probably be more like Earth-like gravity, just for familiarity. But occasionally we would definitely have places like, maybe there's a moon outpost or something, and that would have a lower gravity, and then that would just rely on all the FPS sort of zero gravity or zero low gravity mechanics that we're building right now in the FPS. All right, there you go. That's the 10 questions. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully you found my answers interesting. Thank you to subscribers for contributing the extra money that allows us to do these kind of shows. Thank you to everyone out there that's backed the game. We couldn't be making this incredibly ambitious game without your support. So myself and the team really appreciate it. We've been having a lot of fun recently. The Gamescom event last month was great, and it was great to meet and see a whole bunch of people. We're here, heads down, hard at work, trying to get you Release 13, V0.9 out, which I'm hoping I guess there's wood made out of this thing this week. And I'll catch you next week. Bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching 10 for the Chairman. If you guys would like to see more episodes, go here. If you guys would like to subscribe to our YouTube channel and always keep up to date with all our video content, go here. And if you guys would like to watch episodes of Around the Verse, go here please. And I will see you in the verse.